Hey everybody, this is Matt here again with another game analysis. I was using the white pieces against Mansoorlion on Chess Live. The current ratings were my 1523 against his 1486. One thing to keep in mind about this game, it was a blitz game, and we'll see at the end how that played a very big role in the gameplay. So it starts out with pawn to d4, and black responds with pawn to d5. And now I push up pawn to c4, going into the queen's gambit. Black responds with knight to f6, and then I play knight to c3, and he plays pawn to a6. Seems a little early to be playing a pawn move such as this. I mean, there's really not a piece that's going to be coming to this square at the moment. You know, the knight's really not looking to come here right now, unless the queen were gone from this square guarding this square. But regardless, play continued with pawn to e4, just solidifying this pawn here in case it captures. And in fact, I just answered a question that I had. This pawn more than likely came here, so that if this pawn were to capture, the normal pawn up would not let me maintain the pawn here. But better than this pawn would be, you know, pawn to c6 probably. But anyway, I just answered my own question. So play continued. He plays pawn to e6, just putting a supporter to this pawn in case I were to capture, so that maybe his queen would not have to come into the center of the board if the knights were to be traded as well. And I'll respond with knight to f3, just developing another piece. And next comes pawn to h6. Again, it seems just to prevent maybe this knight from coming here. But regardless, play continues with pawn captures on d5, pawn captures on d5, and pawn to g3. Getting ready to fianchetto this bishop. The play has really gone more into a Catalan system, with just a different variation of move to get to it. The next play was bishop to g4, pinning the knight, and I wanted to break that pin. I wanted to put a question to the bishop. I didn't want this bishop just hanging out here the whole game, you know, making my knight useless. So I just go ahead and advance h3 now, just kind of making this bishop, you know, either capture or, you know, let me know his plans, what he wants to do with this bishop, rather than let it sit there for, you know, a few turns. So he just draws the bishop back, trying to maintain this pin. And I play, go ahead and fianchetto my bishop. Go ahead and, you know, since he's going to keep the pin, I really don't want to push this pawn up, try to, you know, kick this bishop, because, I mean, it's pretty obvious that I do want a castle. And, you know, weakening my pawn structure just doesn't seem very favorable at the moment. And so play continues. The bishop comes down, now pinning this knight to my king, and I then bring the queen here. Does two things. It breaks this pin that this bishop had, as well as protects this knight, so that I don't have to recapture with this pawn, giving, you know, my one pawn against his, you know, three pawns here. Really, you know, two, since this pawn can maybe prevent this pawn from coming into it, but it would be a 2-to-1 majority, and I really don't want to have to deal with that maybe later in the game. So play continues. The knight comes here, just trying to put pressure on the knight. You know, if you pin a piece, you want to increase the pressure on that piece, because it just really can either force a move that maybe, you know, your opponent doesn't want to make, or maybe you'll win that piece at some point. I'll respond with that by playing knight to d4, really just trying to force some tension to leave. In this variation, the pawn would still have to capture this way, but it's really just putting a question to this entire situation. I can take this knight now, and if I'm threatening to win material at the moment by doing so. And Black played a pretty surprising move from here. He actually plays knight captures on f2, really trying to just open up some lines right now. With this queen coming here after the king recaptures. And so play continues, the king does recapture the material, and then the queen does come up. And rather than move my king, I felt just bringing the knight back was better. Because the knight really wasn't doing much on this square anymore. It was really kind of just there to try to force the knight that was here to move, and that did occur. And this knight is no longer free from this bishop, and so I just wanted to bring it back here so that it had more options to jump. From here, it really didn't have anywhere else to jump except maybe over here. So I just bring the knight back to break the pin. Also, I don't want to bring my king back down. That's going to lock this rook in. I want to be able to get this rook over here somewhere before I bring my king back down somewhere. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Play continued. He brought this pawn up. The knight was no longer pinned to the king, so this pawn was actually hanging for black, and I was threatening actually to take this and forking queen and bishop. So he just plays this pawn to secure the d5 pawn, and play continues. I bring my rook to f1, really just kind of threatening later tactical play perhaps. The rook is on the same file as the queen. There's quite a few pieces in the way, but that can change fairly quickly, and that's something that black would have to worry about later. Black plays next castle, just trying to maybe get a rook into place at some point. Also, king safety is a big deal. And next comes the king back to g2, just one more step from getting this rook to this queen. So this is starting to become something that white might really need to, black-white might really need to consider as a threat that could occur. Instead, though, black actually played bishop to g6, hitting my queen. So I play queen to b3, just hitting this unprotected bishop. I really didn't want to try something fancy like moving this knight to maybe take his queen after he takes my queen. I would rather just maintain this threat for later and go ahead and hit this bishop and maybe force, see what'll come from the situation. So play continues. He puts his bishop here, and I make what I think was a blunder. He's attacking my rook, and I looked at it, and I end up playing the move, rook comes up to f2, but after reviewing it, I kind of wish I had just captured this bishop, and after his bishop capture the bishop back with either the king or my bishop, and be up in material. Again, this was a blitz game. I didn't really think about it. I just saw, hey, he's attacking my piece, let's move that piece out of the way. And I move it up, obviously, to maintain this threat against the queen. So now the queen moves over, guarding the bishop. I've now lost, my attack that I was trying to play, and I end up playing the move not to e5, just hitting this bishop that's again unprotected, and just kind of bringing my knight to a more central square. The knight's significantly more active right here than it was here. Also opens up this semi-file for my rook to maybe come up on at some point later in the game. So play continues. The bishop retreats back to f6, g6, and it's still being hit by this knight. And at some point I might want to take, I do have to take into consideration that he can recapture and open up a file for his rook. But play continues. I just push this pawn up, just trying to put a question onto the bishop. I don't really want the bishop just sitting here. And so black plays bishop captures knight, and I play queen captures bishop. And now black plays the move pawn to b5, just trying to start pushing maybe some sort of pawn storm, and I just go ahead and end that possibility right off with pawn to b4. Next comes knight to d7, hitting my knight and just trying to get the knight in the game. The knight was previously undeveloped, and it doesn't really have anywhere else to go, and it is attacking my better placed knight, and I don't want to trade knights because I'm trading my well placed knight for his poorly placed knight. So instead, I go ahead and take the bishop. So now he recaptures with the pawn, and now we have some rook exchanges, and now I play the move pawn to e4, just trying to strike at this center pawn that black still holds. It's being supported by this bishop to maybe get my bishop to a more active square. At the moment, it's just kind of staring at its own material right now, and but previous to that, it was just staring at, a pawn wall that it wasn't going to be able to have any play, and it doesn't have any play along this diagonal. So I wanted to kind of clear this up, maybe give my bishop some more options for later in the game. So he takes the pawn, I recapture the pawn. It's well to note that the time at this point was starting to become an issue. The time was starting to get, I don't remember exactly, but it was becoming dangerously low for him and pretty low for me. I was having to play pretty quickly without being able to think all my moves through very far. Play continued, he just moved the knight back. I was hitting this pawn twice with the queen and the bishop, and so he defends with the knight, since the knight wasn't really doing anything anyway, and he doesn't want to tie his rook to this pawn. So play continues with bishop to f4, kind of hitting this queen and hitting this knight. I have thoughts of maybe at some point taking this knight. It would then force the rook to recapture, and then I can win this pawn. So that's this thought that I had in my mind. He plays queen to e6. This attacks my undefended bishop, and at the time it didn't hit me, but he was also attacking this undefended pawn. I was really focused on the bishop at this point. Again, time was becoming a issue. So I play rook to e4. Just again, in my mind, I was seeing, I didn't understand. I didn't know he was going to be able to bring his queen here, just take a pawn. But I was, I'm lining the rook up with the queen, and this queen just goes ahead and takes that pawn, and the attack is lost on the queen. So now I play what I had previously mentioned, just taking that knight so that I could win more material and gain a better, position centrally. This pawn is blocking, the queen's view to an extent. So the rook recaptures, and now I capture with the queen, trying to get my queen with more options and places to go. Maybe getting an attack on this king somehow. I am up to material at the moment. So play continues. The queen captures this pawn now, and again, it had not hit me that this pawn was also free. I was really just trying to. I'd already seen the move. I didn't realize what the new situation was. I was just kind of going with what I had previously planned. So I moved the king over. The rook comes over. At this point, I was a little bit concerned. I wasn't sure exactly. Obviously, black has a very active position right now that I do need to worry about, but I wasn't sure if it was going to be active enough. Black was very low on time, and again I was low on time, and these moves were happening very quickly. So the king moves, the rook comes down to do another check. I move the king down, the queen comes over to do a check, and I block with the bishop, and he actually makes a serious blunder, not realizing. He takes the bishop, not realizing that this queen was actually watching that square, and this just leads to disaster. Now the queen recaptures. Best black can do is recapture, and now we were playing these moves all automatically. The time was about to run out. Black is actually going to run out of time, and that is how white wins, rather than a resign or a checkmate. So we see these moves. The king moves here, it is in check. I move the queen to capture the pawn, and black actually runs out of time before this king can even move. And that's how the game ends. So if you have any questions or any comments, post them, and thanks for watching.